Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks so much for tuning in. We have a brand new story for you today, so let's dive right in. My name's Jack, and what I'm about to share with you completely changed how I view love, marriage, and even myself. For years, I thought I was doing everything right, or at least enough to keep my marriage intact. I wasn't perfect, but I tried. I made compromises, lettings go, and kept telling myself that love meant sacrifice. But then, one day, I overheard something that shattered all the illusions I had about our relationship. My wife, the woman I thought I knew so well, said something that made me question whether any of it had ever been real. And from that moment on, everything changed. Let me walk you through exactly what happened, step by step, because if I had picked up on the signs earlier, maybe I would have saved myself from years of wasted effort. This isn't just a story of betrayal. It's about waking up, seeing the truth, and knowing when it's time to walk away. If I'm being honest, my marriage to Kate didn't start with love or even deep attraction. It was arranged. Our families were close, and they thought we'd make a good match. At the time, I didn't have any strong feelings one way or the other. I wasn't someone who actively sought out romance, and Kate seemed like a decent enough person. She was quiet, polite, and had a certain elegance about her that made me think she'd be a good partner. So when our family suggested we meet, I went along with it. Our first meeting was awkward, not because Kate was rude, but because we were strangers trying to force some kind of connection. She didn't say much, and I wasn't sure if that was just her personality or if she wasn't interested. But as time passed, we got more comfortable with each other. Our conversations became easier, and we learned about each other, our favorite foods, our thoughts on work, and how we viewed life in general. It wasn't a passionate love story, but it was comfortable. A year later, we got married. It wasn't a grand event, no big emotional speeches, just a simple ceremony with close family and friends, the usual expectations. I won't pretend it was perfect, but I thought it was fine. We had a routine. We didn't fight much, and I convinced myself that maybe love would grow over time. I'd heard that not all marriages start with passion, and that love could be something you built over the years. So I told myself that as long as we respected each other and worked toward the same goals, things would eventually fall into place. Looking back now, I realize I was fooling myself. One evening, after a long day at work, I came home exhausted, just wanting to relax. As I walked past our bedroom, I overheard Kate on the phone. At first, I didn't pay much attention, but then I heard her say I would never be with him again. She wasn't angry, just sure of herself, like she'd already made up her mind. My heart sank. At first, I didn't know if she was talking about me, but as she kept talking, it became clear she was. Something in me just broke. I stood there, frozen. She was on the phone with her sister, telling her that if she had the chance, she would never be with me again. It wasn't just that she was unhappy. It was the fact that she regretted being with me in the first place. That hit me like a ton of bricks. I wanted to walk into that room and ask her what she meant. I wanted her to look me in the eyes and say it again, but I didn't. Instead, I backed away quietly, careful not to make a sound. I wasn't ready to face whatever truth was waiting for me, so I did nothing. I carried on like I hadn't heard anything, but from that moment on, something shifted. I started seeing Kate in a different light. All the little things I had brushed off before started to make sense. She had always been distant, never really opening up unless I directly asked her something. I used to think it was just her personality, that over time, she would open up more. But now, I was starting to understand. She had never really let me in, not from the beginning. And it wasn't just the emotional distance. I started noticing how she complained more than usual, how she seemed irritated by things she used to tolerate. It felt like she was gradually pushing me away, piece by piece, and I had been blind to it. I didn't say a word to her about what I overheard. I wanted to, but something held me back. I wasn't ready to hear it from her directly, so I buried it deep inside. Over the next few weeks, I watched her closely. Then, one evening, everything became crystal clear. I got off work early for once. I didn't call to tell Kate I was coming home. I never thought I had to. Our apartment was just a few minutes away, and I was looking forward to some peace before dinner. When I stepped inside, I went straight to the bedroom, and that's when I saw them. Kate was in our bed, wrapped up in another man's arms. They were so lost in each other that they didn't even notice me at first. For a second, my mind couldn't process what I was witnessing. It felt like everything around me was moving in slow motion. My body acted before my brain could catch up, and I just reacted. I charged at him, the man in my wife's bed, grabbing the closest thing to me. I don't even recall the first punch landing, but the next thing I knew, he was stumbling backward, trying to shield himself from my anger. He wasn't prepared for a confrontation. He struggled to free himself, panicking as I hit him again. And then, in a moment of sheer cowardice, he pushed past me and bolted out of the room, grabbing his clothes in a rush and running through the door as though his life depended on it. I turned to Lillian, expecting, I don't know what, guilt? Fear? Perhaps an apology? But no, she didn't offer any of that. Instead, she was angry with me. "What's wrong with you?" she yelled. "You had no right to hit him." I stood there, still breathing heavily, my fists clenched at my sides. No right? She had just torn apart our marriage, and now she was angry at me for defending myself. But I didn't argue. Deep down, I already knew. I didn't need to hear her words to understand what was happening. I took a final glance at her. This woman I had tried so hard to love, to build a life with. Then, in the calmest voice I could muster, I said, "You're free to be with him. This marriage is over." I packed a few things I would need for the next few days and walked out without another word. I checked into a small, unremarkable hotel room far away from her. The room didn't matter. It was just a place to put distance between us. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor as my mind replayed the events that led to this moment. The signs had been there all along, but I refused to see them. I convinced myself that things would get better, that with time, Lillian would come around. But no matter how much I tried, I couldn't fix something that was never real to begin with. I reached for my phone, half expecting nothing, but checked it anyway. No calls, no messages. If there were any lingering doubts about where I stood in her life, they died with that silence. She didn't care. She wasn't going to fight for this. The silence was louder than any words she could have spoken. It became clear what I had to do. I opened my browser, found a divorce lawyer, and booked an appointment. I didn't even look at the price. It didn't matter. I wasn't going to waste another second in a marriage where I wasn't wanted. When I received the confirmation email, I exhaled deeply, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Finality. This was it. It was over. Throughout the divorce proceedings, I sat across from my lawyer, hardly paying attention as he explained the paperwork. My thoughts were elsewhere. The process was moving quickly, too quickly. Lillian hadn't contested anything, which told me everything I needed to know. She wanted out just as much as I did. But in the midst of everything, something came to light that made my stomach churn. The man I had found in our bed, the one I had attacked in my fury, wasn't just some random person. He was Lillian's ex. The same ex she had always painted as toxic, abusive, and controlling. The same man she had sworn she would never go back to. Yet there he was, in our bed, right under my nose. I couldn't believe how blind I had been. From the start, Lillian had painted him as a villain. She told me he was manipulative, that he had no respect for her boundaries, and that she was grateful to be in a stable, loving relationship with me. And like a fool, I believed her. I thought I was her safe choice, the man who would treat her right, the one who wouldn't hurt her like he did. But now, everything seemed like a lie. If he was so awful, why did she go back to him? Had she ever really left him at all? Or had I just been the backup, the one she settled for when she wanted something comfortable? The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. Lillian never loved me. She liked the security I provided, the stability, and the way I worked hard to make her happy. But love? That was never a part of the equation. And the worst part? I had seen the signs. They were there all along, but I ignored them. I convinced myself that love was something that grew over time. I thought that if I was patient, if I just tried harder, she would finally see how much I cared, and she'd love me back. But love doesn't work that way. You don't have to convince someone to love you. You don't have to prove your worth to someone who genuinely wants to be with you. And yet, that's exactly what I had done. I had lowered my standards, accepted accepting less than I deserve just to hold on to someone who didn't even want to be kept. That realization hurt more than the betrayal itself, because in the end, Lillian wasn't the only one to blame. I had done this to myself. I chose to remain blind to the truth when it was staring me right in the face. The truth was clear, and I wasn't going to ignore it anymore. When the divorce was final, I didn't waste any time looking back. I was determined to move on, rebuild my life, and leave everything behind. Lillian, on the other hand, ran straight back into the arms of the man she had betrayed me for. She probably thought she had won, thought she had upgraded, that she had escaped a marriage she never really wanted in the first place. But I didn't care. She made her choice, and I had already made mine. Months passed, and life started moving forward. But then, I began hearing things. Mutual friends started telling me that Lillian wasn't faring as well as she thought she would. At first, I wasn't interested. Her life was no longer my concern. But one day, a friend casually mentioned that the man she cheated on me with was now treating her badly, beating her over the smallest things. I paused. This was the same man she had once painted as a monster, claiming he was abusive and toxic. She had told me all about how he used to control her, shout at her, and make her feel worthless. And yet, here she was, willingly going back to him. The more I heard, the clearer it became. History was repeating itself, but this time, I wasn't trying to fix things. He had her under his thumb, controlling her every move. She couldn't even go out without explaining herself. When he got angry, it wasn't just yelling anymore. He hit her. From what I heard, it wasn't a rare occurrence either. People thought I would react, maybe with anger or pity, but I felt nothing. No sadness, no sympathy, no satisfaction, just emptiness. She knew exactly what she was walking into, and yet she did it anyway. I wasn't her husband anymore, and I had no interest in whatever chaos she had thrown herself into. She made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. Over a year went by, and life had moved on for me. But then, out of nowhere, I got a message. It was from Lillian. "Hey, I know I don't deserve to ask this, but can we talk?" I just stared at it. After everything that had happened, she had the nerve to reach out like we were old friends. I didn't respond because I didn't care, but she didn't stop there. A few more messages came over the next couple of days. "I'm so sorry for everything. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. I was selfish. I took your love for granted. You didn't deserve that. Please, Simon, just say something." As I read her words, I could almost hear her voice in my head, but nothing stirred inside me. She had broken me down piece by piece, making me question my worth. Back then, I would have done anything to make her happy. I spent so much time thinking, if I love her harder, if I try more, she'll finally see me. But she never did. And now she wanted forgiveness. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to be petty, but because her apology meant nothing to me. It didn't undo the nights I spent lying awake, wondering why I wasn't enough. It didn't erase the image of her in our bed with another man. It didn't fix the damage she caused. So I let her words sit there, unanswered, just like she had left my love unappreciated. I learned something from all of this, and if there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this: never settle for love that isn't reciprocated. I spent so much time trying to be a good husband, trying to make things work, believing that if I just gave a little more, she'd appreciate me. But love doesn't work that way. If someone doesn't want to be with you, no amount of effort will change that. I ignored the signs. I told myself things would get better, but in the end, I was just delaying the inevitable. Pay attention to the red flags. I should have seen them from the beginning. Her emotional distance, her lack of effort, the way she never really opened up to me. I convinced myself that she just needed time, but deep down, she was never invested. And when people aren't invested, they eventually leave, whether physically or emotionally. Looking back, I see that I was the only one holding on to something that was never real to begin with. If someone doesn't value you, walk away before they destroy you. Staying in a one-sided relationship drains you in ways you can't even understand. You lose yourself trying to make someone else happy, and in the end, they still leave, or worse, they betray you. I spent years thinking I was building something, only to realize she had already checked out. The day I walked away was the day I started rebuilding myself. And trust me, Nothing feels better than finally putting yourself first. So if you're in a situation where you're constantly questioning if your partner truly wants to be with you, don't wait for an answer. Their actions already tell you everything you need to know. Respect yourself enough to walk away.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button and turn on notifications so you never miss more shocking real-life stories like this. See you in the next one.